So today we are going to be talking about um, operations things, and I felt like the perfect person to have in here when we're talking about operations is our own director of operations and manager of operations, Amalia here. So if you all can wave at Amalia, she is not always able to be on these sustainability institutes and was gracious enough to come and join us today, and especially for this particular one because we're going to be talking about how to keep everybody moving in the same direction, how to help our organizations, our programs, all of those things operating even
Where
when
did it
some
go?
key
It
people
disappeared, bro.
aren't actually there.
You have to hit that thing that says
So
or.
if let's see, there we go. Um, uh, so having Amalia here is great, and she'll be talking to us kind of throughout the day. But Amalia, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Yes. Hi, everyone. As Patrick mentioned, I'm Amalia Vavola. My official title is Associate Director of Development and Operations, which means I do a lot of different things, but I'm happy to be here.
So one of the things that Amalia does for us is you're going to see a lot of her stuff is in communications. So all of the worksheets and resources that we put together for Sustainability Institute, she's our fabulous designer and helps us put all those things together. Just a couple of quick little things, just housekeeping things. As a reminder, we are recording. If you don't feel comfortable with being recorded, you can just shut off your little thing and we'll start. We'll kind of clip up to this point. We don't put on the video all of my fun commentary at the beginning because nobody needs to hear that twice. So we will be recording this. If there are people in your organization, in your program that you think this would be helpful to watch, these will be posted up in about a week or so. And so as a reminder, Sustainability Institutes, we shifted this year to making them virtual. So instead of requiring you to come to 2 in-person Sustainability Institutes, what we're asking you to do is to come to 3 virtual Sustainability Institutes. That's where you're at right now. And what this allows you to do is you don't just have to do it when we're live. You can go back to our Sustainability Institute webpage and you can see all of our previous ones. You can watch a recording of it and then fill out just kind of a brief form so that we can give you credit. We know that during the pandemic and just kind of during life in general, it's hard to come out on a Saturday for an all-day event or something like that. So what we wanted to do is give you options. That's why we've shifted things online here. What I would encourage you to do is, as we're talking today, we're going to have several times we're going to just be asking kind of open-ended questions to you all. Feel free to type those into the chat, or you can unmute yourself for a moment, kind of give your comment and then remute yourself. That way we don't have to hear dogs or cars or bears. Maybe there's a bear outside of Phyllis's patio there, I don't know. So just be aware of that. And as you can see in the chat, we're going to try to keep everything we're going to try to keep links going. So Amalia just threw in the link for the Sustainability Institute website, so feel free to take a look at that. Just a couple of quick announcements coming up. The recording of the volunteer orientation, how to do volunteer orientation, is up on the Sustainability Institute website. 2 big Sustainability Institutes are coming up at the end of the summer in August. One is about SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits are so important for so many people. And so we're going to be doing a training. We're going to do kind of an extended training about SNAP benefits and how to connect people to those benefits. You're not going to be the expert on SNAP, but what this training will allow you to do is to really understand what it is. Because for a lot of you that are doing feeding programs, having access to SNAP benefits is so important. And so I want to encourage you to think about that. We'll be posting up more about that. That'll be on Thursday, August 26th. And then in September 30th, we're going to be doing a Sustainability Institute, and this will be a little bit longer one. It'll be an hour and a half on COVID-19 and mental health. We know that there's been massive mental health toll on people throughout the pandemic, the people that are coming through your feeding program, your after school program, your arts program, education programs. And so what we want to do is do some very basic training on the impacts of COVID-19 on mental health. And so we have an expert coming in to lead that session from here in the city that does with mental health issues. So we hope that's going to be helpful. Remember, if there are topics you want us to cover in a Sustainability Institute, these are for you. So tell us what you need. If you want to learn about something that we're not covering, shoot me a note, shoot SK a note, and we will try to find an expert or do a lot of homework to study up on it.
Something I just want to highlight really quickly, Patrick.
Yeah.
The SNAP Sustainability Institute on August 26th, because we're partnering with the food bank of NYC, we don't have an active registration link for that yet, but what you can do is pre-register. It's the exact same button on the Sustainability Institute webpage. It'll just say pre-register instead of register. We'll bring you down, and if you just put in your name and email, we'll be able to send you the registration link as soon as it goes up. So it's a little different process. Just wanted to flag that. Don't worry, you'll be the first in line to sign up once that opens.
And we're partnering with the New York Food Bank, and so processes are going to be slightly different across the diocese, but the same information is going to be really critical. Understanding what it is, how to access it, that kind of thing. And what we'll do is we'll bring in some additional commentary to talk about, here's how you get connected in Dutchess County, or here's how you find the resource in Putnam. So just be aware of that. So today's objective is really talking about operations. Is to talk about how you function and how you can keep everybody moving in the same direction. So this is a kind of a quick show of hands. This is a quick poll question. You can either raise your physical hand, you can raise your Zoom hand, whatever you want to do. For how many of your organizations do you have an operations manual? Several of you do, right? Maybe we should step back a moment. Who can define what an operations manual is? Let's go there first. Give me a 1-sentence, 2-sentence definition of an operations manual. Phyllis.
The policy, I lost my voice because of allergies, sorry. It's the policies and procedures that we follow, and it also should give some of the culture of our organization at the same time.
Right, and so it's a document that helps someone, if they're looking at this document, they should have a pretty good understanding of who you are, what you're doing, and how you do it. Right? One of the ways that I think about this kind of document is, I don't know if any of you have left a job and you were trying to create a document, like a transition document, right? So when I was working at St. Bart's in Manhattan, I was leaving there to come to Episcopal Charities, and I spent what felt like forever sometimes typing out, here's the culture of this ministry. This is why we're here. Then I started going through and saying, here are the key people that you're going to need to talk to in order to be successful in this role, right? Because what I wanted to do is start bridging the gap between myself and the relationships I had built and the new person that was coming on to my job. So I was going through, here's who we are. Here are the really key people you need to know and what they do. So here's their role, here's what they do. And here's how for me, I put together a year looks like. Here's from January to December, what a year looks like right now. So that person could come in, open up this document, and begin to see an outline of the way we operated. Does that make sense? So there's a difference between, how many of you all have, like, in your day jobs, like an employee handbook, right? Are they thin or thick? I worked at the 92nd Street Y for a while, and like it was the world's most gargantuan employee handbook with every conceivable policy. Here's how you deal with the union. I mean, everything. This operations manual is not that, right? This is an outline. This is a sense of who you are and what you're doing. So again, I think it's really helpful to keep this image of like a transition document in mind. So I began to kind of brainstorm, and let me see if you want to put anything in the chat. What would hold a program or organization back from doing like some kind of operations manual? Like, what are the reasons why you wouldn't do this? I started coming up with a few just from all the site visits I do and all the conversations I have with people. One of the most common reasons I've seen is I'll go in and I'll say, so, hey, how do you do things? And the answer is, well, time constraints is a huge one. We'll talk about that in just a second. Who should do it? There it is. We'll talk about that as well. These are great. One of the biggest answers I get from people is, well, John does that all the time. Well, I don't really know how we order food. John does that. Well, I'm not really sure where the volunteers, how they check in, because John does that, or Betty does that. Or what happens with a lot of our programs is all of the knowledge gets centralized into one person, which means everybody else can just kind of step back because what? John does it, or Betty does it. And they've been doing it for 20 years, the way they like to do it. And we just don't mess with Betty because she has a way that she does it, right? So there's a lot of sense of like, oh, we just know this. Or volunteers will do this. I'll say, hey, how do you all operate? And I said, how do other people know how you operate? And they'll say, oh, everybody knows. Have you ever heard that? Oh, everybody knows. We all know how to do this. Probably not. Probably not. We're making lots of assumptions when we assume that everybody knows how we do things. It's just like at the very beginning when I talked about Kevin coming on, our new executive director, and as a staff, we're like, oh, the BHN and the YOG, and here's the cycle for the AC. And we're like, everybody knows what all these things mean. Do they? Really? So one of these roadblocks are things like, we don't know exactly, we haven't pulled all the different things together to put it in one place. And that's what we're going to encourage you to do, is to have everything in one spot so you can get a real sense as to how you're operating. One of the things that we talk about is, in this example of John or Betty knowing how to do everything and nobody else does, what happens when John or Betty is sick? What happens if there's something that happens and John or Betty just bounce and they're like, I'm done? I've worked with programs in that place, and that is not a good place to be, because there's power dynamics that work in all of that. And so by putting things in a document, by writing things down, we need to kind of equalize the playing field a little bit. We're not going to have all the knowledge in one person where they get to control who knows what, right? So we always have to begin to think about this. And Alan brings up a really, really great point. There's a lot more to running a food pantry than just giving out food. Alan, there's the reporting, there's the purchasing, there's the fundraising, I got to fill out this stinking application for Episcopal Charities to get funding. There's like all of these myriad of things. And if there's not a list out there, if there's not something succinct that someone can pick up and look at and at least get a sense of it, we're doing our program a disservice. And really what we're doing is we're doing a disservice to those that we're serving, right? The people coming to your programs are dependent on you. if you're an after school program, if you're a feeding program, if you're in education, the people you are working with are dependent on you. And if your organization is not able to keep running, if your program is not able to keep operating, if there's a change in who's leading or whatever, like you're leaving people out in a lurch. And we're already working with very vulnerable populations. So this becomes really, really important. Excuse me. So some of the basic questions that have come up. First off, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? All right, questions? We're moving ahead, we're good? All right. One of the questions that came up is who should do this, right? Who should go through this work that we're gonna look at? Well, one, I think it's gonna be very important to have a couple of different people working on this. One, you want the person that's actually doing the work to be a part of this, right? So if it's John or Betty who runs everything, well, they should 100% be involved in this process. And whoever's leading the governance of your organization. So if that is a board, if that's someone from the vestry, that's like the vestry liaison to your program, they should probably be a part of it. Again, the idea is to get more people on board so that all the information isn't just stuck in a siloed place, right? So if it's operations, you want the people that are doing the stuff they have the expertise, like they're the experts in how you do things, right? But if you pull together a small team, whoever's doing the operations, maybe one or two key volunteers, because as you go through this process, here's the great thing about it. You're going to come up with different ways of doing things. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, well, here's been our process. What if we tweaked it like this, right? So it allows a greater sense of community and greater ownership in this process. So take a look at that. The other real concern that people raise is time constraints. When I think about working at the 92nd Street Y, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to put together this massive manual. Like, have you lost your mind? What we're going to go through today is a more simple process, I think, that will just allow you to think about things where you can create a document, an operations manual for a feeding program or something like that. That's a few pages of text. We're not talking about a notebook. We're talking about several pages of just answering some very basic questions. Again, the key function of this is getting everybody on the same page. And in fact, we're going to talk about like the physical page. One of the reasons that I invited Amalia to this conversation is because she has some real expertise, because one of her roles, as she says, is in operations for Episcopal Charities. And one, we're all working remotely right now, right? And so talking about the importance of kind of keeping us all together and moving forward. Amalia, do you want to kind of chat about that for just a second?
Sure. So before I moved into my current role, I didn't know operations was a field you could really go into. I understood administration, I understood development. I didn't know what operations was. And the way I look at operations is that it's basically a set of expectations that gets everyone on the same page. It's boundaries around what's expected, how to respond if there's a problem. And so that way, when everyone is on the same page, you can move efficiently and you can troubleshoot when there's something wrong. So when you create operations, it's not going to be a one size fits all solution, because things happen all of the time, as I'm sure you all know. For example, a pandemic happened and we didn't have any way to really know how to work during a pandemic. So part of what I have been doing over the past year is, okay, how are we as a staff going to know what each other are doing? Who are we going to go to when, our basic processes like, oh, thank you, Patrick, for spotlighting me. Who are we going to go to when we need to approve check requests, we used to just walk it down the hall. Well, we can't walk it down the hall anymore. So operations basically is just how are you going to get something done? And then what happens if there's a problem in getting it done? It's just an overall boundary is how I like to say it.
Well, and Evelyn just put into the chat, which I think is a great one, this idea that we call it a hit by the bus book, right? Like, what happens if you get hit by a bus? Does anybody else know what your account number is with the food bank? Does anybody know the phone number and the rep you work with at Driscoll? Who has the connection with the principal down the street from the school that most of your kids go to? Who's made that introduction, right? So what happens when you get hit by the bus? Again, we're doing a disservice to our clients, our customer, our guests, all our neighbors, when it all resides in us. Because if you get hit by the bus, Evelyn, well, I feel sorry for the bus because you're not messing around. So that bus is going to be hurting, right? Throwing a punch at it. But it's important that other people can carry on and do the thing that you have been given to do, even if you're not there. Okay?
I just had an analogy I just thought of, Patrick, which is it's kind of like the sheet you leave a babysitter. It has all of the phone numbers. It has all of this is what time bedtime is. This is where snacks are, so that someone's not calling you consistently while you're doing something. I have no children, but I remember being a child, so I imagine that this still happens.
That is a perfect way of looking at it. Again, it's trying to help people understand how you operate, how you function, what's going on. So one of the things that we put together for this session is excellent. Do different aspects programs each have manuals. So Stephanie, we're going to talk about that right now. Amalia, can you put in the link to the operations workbook into the chat? Either the Dropbox or
I
the sustainability.
sure can. 1 minute. 1 second,
So
rather.
what we did is we created a workbook that is essentially asking questions. And the paradigm that we use when we were putting this together is kind of basic questions. And again, right there in the chat, there's a Dropbox link. And if you hit that, it'll take you to a file and it says Program Operations Manual Workbook. You can feel free to open that up and kind of follow along while we're chatting. This is for you to use if it's helpful. Take a look at it, use it, whatever you need. But the paradigm we were using, and I'm going to go to Stephanie's question here. The paradigm that we're using with this is a series of questions. I don't know if you ever took in a writing class in high school, and you always did the who, what, where, when, why, how, right? Like asking basic questions. And so what we did here is we took basic question of what, who, where, and when, right? We kind of took the basic operational questions of what, who, where, and when. And the first question of what kind of goes to this question, Stephanie. What I would suggest is that you do have an operations manual or some sort of guide for each one of your programs. Like, I know that you all have a pretty extensive feeding program. You also have an extensive program of like how to pay rent, like rent payments, advocacy stuff that you're doing. And it's not that you're going to recreate everything for each one of these manuals, but you should have something that says to a key volunteer that's doing the food part, here's a section, here's how we do food, here's what a year looks like. Because a year looks different in the food part of your program than it does in the rent part of your program, right? So what we would suggest is, if you have multiple programs going in your larger program, think about it as like when I was in college, right? We had a 3-ring notebook and you put dividers in. right? And each subject had their own divider. So you can think about the first part of this, the what, kind of the overall general mission of the organization, like a UIDN. Here's what we're about. Here's what's really important to us. This is why we exist. And you can do each of those in just a few sentences. And it's really kind of coming from who you are, right? And then as you get into the operation side, it's like flipping to the next section in your notebook, right? Food insecurity. This is why we care about food insecurity. And here's how we deal with food insecurity. Does that make sense? That feeling okay? Great. And how we doing, everybody? We still got thumbs up, thumbs in the middle. Good. All right. We can always go thumbs down. I like Simone when she does like party favors. I think that's always way fun. So think about it. If you've got multiple programs going, you want, nice Simone, you want to be able to have something that says, here's how we do things, right? Here's how we're going to function. And here's why we're functioning the way we're doing. So again, you can look at this while we're talking, or you can just look at it later and just kind of hang with us right now. But the creating a program operations manual, one of the things that we often do in these sustainability institutes is instead of giving you an outline of how your operations manual should look, there's all kinds of templates online. If you just search nonprofit operations manual template, you'll get a bazillion. And the reason why we don't give you those is because all of you all are so different. So the way in which we approach this is to give you a series of questions and then allow you to kind of create whatever you need to create. Again, I think for many of your programs, this can be done in several pages. But these are really, really important pages. So the first question that we really begin to ask ourselves is that what question? What is this program manual for? Like, sometimes we forget to just say what we're doing. You know, have you remember it in like a writing class? You have your thesis statement. So you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you just told them, right? That's what you want to do here. Give us a thesis. Why are you here? How are you going to do it? And then re-say why you're going to do it, right? It's the sandwich piece. So what is this manual for? Asking questions about what is the mission? Why are you working in food insecurity? Why are you working in immigration? Why are you working with formerly incarcerated? This is really, really important. Jan just says, at St. Mary's, there's a list of core volunteers with emails and phone numbers, purchasing agents, backups, community food closet organizations, accident reports, all of this stuff. Exactly. These are the core documents, the core things that help you do your job, right? This is great. At Grace, the Altar Guild has one, right? God knows the Altar Guild at every parish has like the world's biggest document telling you exactly which direction you're supposed to iron the fair linens. You don't go like this, you go like this. I've been on Altar Guilds. That's what you're going for here. You're trying to set up some expectations because, again, if you are a volunteer, you come into a new organization, everybody else kind of knows what's going on and you don't. Well, what you can do is you can take sections of this operations manual and give it to a new volunteer. You don't have to give them the, here's our account code, and here's how but how nice would it be if you are in a feeding program to get a sense of, here's what our year looks like in one page. Here's the ebb and the flow that we go through. Here's what an average day in our program looks like. Because then what happens is that volunteer is able to enter in and engage within a context. They're like, oh, I know I come on Tuesdays, but I see the part that Tuesday has in the rest of the program, and it gives them a sense of being connected to something larger, right? So one of the ways to think about this document is it's not just in case you get hit by a bus, although it's definitely that. What you'll do is you'll take portions of this out and you'll incorporate it into your volunteer orientation and management. You're going to take sections of this, and when you have an all volunteer meeting, you're going to give them a page out of this book to remind them why we're doing things, how we're doing it, all of those things, right? So think about this document as not just operations, but it becomes a little bit of an encyclopedia, right? You know, back in the day, right? Bookshelf full of encyclopedias, right?
I'm seeing
Pull it
a
out.
message from Alan that says he made a manual a few years ago that needs to be updated. So much like encyclopedias that need new additions, you know, it's always a great time to go through one that you have and update any outdated information, and using this guide as a way to figure out what you need to add that maybe wasn't an issue back then.
Right. And again, remember, we are really bad at this part. There may be things in your the last manual that can go to the trash. There may be things you're like, oh, we do not do it like that anymore. Delete, and let's replace it with this is how we do it. So it's not just important as to what we write, it's also what we take out of things. Again, we want the document to be a living, breathing document that begins to help people really understand who you are and how you function. If the last operations manual that you did was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that's not going to be as helpful, right? Especially if we look at COVID. I can guarantee you that all of your operations shifted in COVID. And many of your operations are going to be different now in a post-COVID world than they were in pre-COVID. And so making sure that your operations manual reflects that reality, right? As you continue to evolve as a program, it's kind of like, you know what, January, you're going to throw in your calendar for January 15th of every year to look at your operations manual. To read it, it's just kind of like New Year's resolutions, except we're going to wait till the 15th, so we're actually going to do them. Don't get them tied up with the January 1st ones, or I'm going to do all these things and just forget all of them. So like set it for January 15th or February 1st and just throw it on your calendar and say, we're going to review our operations. And does it reflect the reality of what we're doing right now? If it doesn't, tweak it. Again, you're not having to scrap it. What you're doing is just adjusting, figuring it out a little bit. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down. We good? Great. Again, please feel free to jump questions or anything like that into the chat, and Amalia and I will keep our eye on them throughout the time here. So going back to our document, right? We begin with the what. The next section for me is really, really critical, and I think super, super important to you all, is the who. And I like to think about this. Kevin, our new executive director, talks about this a lot in our staff. He'll ask the question, who owns that? Who owns that thing that has to be done? Who owns the check request process? Because if we don't know who owns it, then everybody just kind of does it and then things fall through the crack, right? Who owns, and we got to be careful, I'll be careful about the language of own, like this is mine, you can never do it. But who's going to be responsible for things? Who does a volunteer go to in different circumstances? Again, what we've done in the worksheet is we've just begun asking you a bunch of questions. Things to think about, and we give you space so you can write it out, you can do whatever you want to. But how are we going, who do people go to? Who has access to information? Think about it. All of your programs have pretty private information about people. If you're working with students, you have grades or discipline or medications that they're on. You have private contact information for their families, right? If you're a feeding program, names, emails, phones, street addresses, size of family, all kinds of information. One of the things you want in your operations manual is who has access to that information and how do people have access to that information. I can tell you, it shouldn't be that all your volunteers have access to all the information, right? There should be some guidelines. Volunteers have access to who's coming to that program that day and the size of their family if it's a feeding program, because they're going to try to put this stuff together, right? But they probably shouldn't have street address and a new volunteer coming in. No, you don't know them. So under this who, it's asking questions about who has access to things, and it's asking who do you go to and who kind of owns different things so that you know where to go. Again, you can use some of these questions and some of these documents that are going to go into your volunteer orientation. So don't think about this manual as I do this manual once a year, I check it in February or whatever, and then I just throw it away. You're spending too much time on it to not keep using it. So think about if you were to take several of these, if you just even typed out in your operations manual, who does the food ordering? And you type out who does the food ordering, kind of when. Who does a volunteer go to if they need to reschedule their time? You type out the 3 sentences for that. What if you took several of those questions, put them on a page, and gave it to all your volunteers? So now all your volunteers are on the same page. Again, if we think about rowing, if we have several little boats out on the water and we're all trying to tug something, we're like a tugboat. Let's go tugboats. So we've got tugboats. Now, if we're pulling something, if we're pulling this huge liner that's stuck somewhere, the tugboats are going to be pulling in the same direction, right? Well, what happens when those tugboats are going like this? They're working against each other, right? What your operations manual does is it takes people that are kind of just doing what their own thing, and I think we're going this way, and brings them in alignment so that you can do more and you can be more effective and you can serve in a better way. That's the importance of these kinds of documents. Again, you're going to take sections of this. There's going to be parts of this, like when you're putting your account numbers and stuff like that, maybe don't share that with everybody, right? But it should be available to some key people in case something happens to you, right? And you should be using them to help out. Amalia.
So in the chat, Kelly from Mount Kisco says, we ask volunteers accessing confidential information to sign a confidentiality agreement, which is awesome. And is also something that can go in your operations manual. We'll talk about, I think a little later on, having forms and any sort of reference documents that you're going to give to people are definitely something that should go in the manual.
That's so spot on. And Kelly, if you want to send us that, the confidentiality agreement, we'll post it into the resource section of this, because I think it's a great idea. So let's keep moving through. Thanks so much for that, Kelly. I really appreciate it. Because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to kind of chat and kind of ask questions. Again, most of these questions are pretty self-explanatory. I really like the responsibility matrix. This is actually, Amalia came up with this. Look at function, placing wholesale food orders. Person responsible is Mary. Backup support is who? To have everything in a one page? Great. Then you post this if you want to. Everybody knows who's doing what. Amalia.
I just want to say quickly, sorry for the constant interruptions. I just want to say quickly, this is not completely my own. This is adapted from the food pantry at St. Peter's Church in Manhattan. So I did this iteration, but it was not my original idea. So I just want to throw credit to where that's due.
That is due to Alice, the fabulous director at St. Peter's in Chelsea. So again, there's a bunch of questions on who has access to what, who do I go to if I need something, right? And then the where, right? Where are volunteers and guests allowed to be? Again, this is going to be connected. This is all different for different kinds of programs, but volunteers, volunteers, you know, if you're working in a youth program, volunteers should not be allowed to be alone with a student without another adult there. And that needs to be spelled out so that everybody is on the same page, right? So we're going to look at like where are your guests? You know, are your guests allowed into the office? Again, it's so everybody's on the same page. It's not that you're putting giant stop signs and do not enter tape across certain rooms, but it is saying, oh, all the volunteers know that this is the space for just volunteers, or this is the space, this is where we put all of your backpacks and purses or whatever, your personal belongings when you're volunteering. That means nobody else is allowed in that space, right? So think about this, again, this idea of what, who, where can I find what I need, and then when. What does a typical day look like for you? When do people show up? Do you have a volunteer meeting? When is that? Again, think about this document as not just here's my operations manual, but you're going to take pages of this and put it toward your volunteers. What an amazing thing. It's great when I go into some programs and I can actually see the daily schedule taped up on the wall. We get the room ready at 10. Clients start lining up at 10:30. The first distribution happens at 10:45. We're done by 3. At 3:30, we clean up and we're done by 4. You know, like having a day mapped out. So again, if I'm a new volunteer, we want to be welcoming to people, right? Oh, when everybody knows what's going on, to be able to have something up or to be able to refer to something and be like, oh, wait a minute. Here's where we're at right now. Here's what I can do next. Does that make sense? Thumbs up. All right. So that's the when. The other piece that I think is really helpful on the when is put together a snapshot of 1 year. Just so, like at Episcopal Charities, for our board, every board meeting, there's a year at a glance form that goes through and just says, listen, here's where we are in the scope of our year. Here's where we're headed. Oh, we have our big gala in November. Remember that's coming up. Go raise some money for us, right? Remember we're doing this in the summer, or basic human need grants are in August and September. So be ready to vote on it. And this, like, so we have the full kind of year at a glance going through. Does that make sense? I think that becomes so incredibly helpful. We've actually, Amalia, we've operationalized this so it's digital for us as a staff. So we're plugging in everything so that we can see exactly what's going on. Finally, forms. Whatever forms you have, put in the operations manual. Do you have an intake form? Put it in. Do you have an evaluation form? Do you have a regular ordering form? Do you have a report that you have to submit to a food bank? Whatever kinds of forms that you have, do you have a form that talks about that volunteers have read your Safe Church or sexual assault policy? Here's that form, right? Do you have a checklist of all the things your volunteer has to do in order to be a volunteer in your organization? You know, some programs are going to require an interview or a background check, depending on the kind of organization. a conversation. What are the 4, 5, 6 things that every volunteer has to do in order to volunteer in that program? Put in the form. Again, so if something happens, someone can pick up that book and be like, oh, we have a new volunteer. What are we supposed to do with them? Oh, they need to get a copy of this. They need to have a conversation with the director, the program director, and they have to have a reference call. Check boxes. Forms there. We all know what's going on. Does that make sense? So in this last section is where I would put forms that you have and policies that you have. You should all have a sexual misconduct prevention policy. Again, we've worked on that at the beginning of the year. That should be in your manual, right? So I've gone 2 minutes over what I wanted to do. I'm so sorry. So we've let me look at one more thing to make sure I covered. Yes. Volunteers report to. Great. Yes. Okay. How's this heading, everybody? What would be helpful? So if you could put in the chat, give me one sentence that is kind of resonating with you, or something you want to take away from this, something you're like, oh, I remember, like, I want to remember this thing, and throw it in the chat, or you can say it out loud if you want to. I think I think it's helpful. It's a helpful reflection process to be like, oh, I want to remember this. Update your manuals. It's huge. Let it be living. Let it stay fresh and connected, right? So always look at that. Documents for volunteers are so important. Everything can't live. Update it yearly. Everything can't live in one person's head. I cannot tell you the number of programs that I've worked with where everything lives in one person's head, and it's not good. It's just not good. Review old manuals, right? Creating the outline in the form of questions and filling in the blanks as we go through the operations process day to day. I think it's going to be really helpful. Again, because we don't know all of your operations, and all of your operations are different, questions become really helpful. Phyllis, I see you.
We actually had advisory board members follow different key staff members around and write down what they did, because when you do it yourself, you don't realize what you do. So they just followed him around for a couple of days, and we were like, we're not evaluating you, we're just trying to get what everybody does, because we just didn't really have a handle on it.
That is so smart. The experts are the ones doing it. You have an expertise, but you are not the ultimate expert on everything, right? When we think that way, we become a very top-down organization, right? Well, I know everything. Oh, follow the people that are doing it. And I think it's a great idea to be like, listen, we're not evaluating, we're just trying to figure out what the heck you do so that we can write it down, right? So when we talk about who should be a part of this, it's bringing in multiple people. Like when I say, oh, whoever does operations should be a part of this, right? It is, and it's not just the person who's in charge of the operations, it's the people that are doing it. Because again, this also gives you an opportunity to do evaluation. Are we doing this the best way? Are we serving the needs of our people in the most effective way? And that is a critical question. Ask some of your participants, what's it like to come through our program? Did you know what to do? What do you think you're supposed to do? Because it's always interesting talking to clients or guests to get their perception of what you're doing or what they should be doing. It's often somewhat different than what you think it is. So again, it's shutting up sometimes and asking questions. What's it like for you? How does this operate? How do you think we can operate better? What would be better for you? Should we have a sign-up system? What should we be doing that's different, that would be better for you? Ask your volunteers. How can we help you? What's a better way of doing this? At Episcopal Charities, it's one of the things, it's why we're doing a virtual sustainability institutes, because we asked, what's a better way to do this? And they're like, can you please record them so we don't have to come to Poughkeepsie for 3 or 4 hours all the time? Yes, we can. So it's important to engage lots of people as we're looking at things. Again, Amalia's posting up, the workbook can be found here in the Dropbox. So we'll share everything that we got. Anything that you want, we got it. So I like Simone's comment about, I think I like that a lot. Thinking of how many other procedures can be extracted from our heads to something our volunteers can refer to. And extracting things from their heads. Your volunteers have started doing things that you may not know that are actually just better because they're in the trenches doing it. So again, when you ask your volunteer, what do you do? Show me what you do so that we can record it so that the next person doing it after you is already ahead of the game. Does that make sense? So again, engaging people. Any questions or kind of thoughts here about this? Again, I think it's so important that we get everybody on the same page. Because again, the objective here is the service of those people that we're living with, that we're working with, our clients, our guests, whoever we're working with. We're trying to serve them. And by getting everybody on the same page and operating together, it's like we're singing in the choir, right? We got to do that. So I would look toward kind of having those conversations with more and more people. Just a quick reminder, if you came in a little bit late, no worries. If you would put your name and your organization in the chat for me, that would be great. That's how we're taking attendance. So please put your name and organization in the chat for us. So I think with that, everybody, y'all are awesome. It's always so great to see you. It's great to be a part of what you all are doing. Please let us know if we can be of help to you. If we can just be in conversation with you, we're so happy to do that. Okay. So with that, boom, 5 o'clock, right on the dot. Yes. We'll take off. Everyone have a great day. Thanks so much for being here with us today, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Patrick. Lots of good information.
All right, see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Good job.